Here is a quick overview of what we will cover. We will cover proving the supply curve, real-world cost structure and pricing, theory, perfect competition, oligopoly, monopoly, P2, industry structure according to neoclassical economics, application, a deregulated industry walkthrough, summary, how the lecture fits together. We will start with the foundations, build step by step, and end by tying the ideas together. The supply curve shows how much of a product suppliers are willing to sell at different prices. Proving this curve involves understanding how supply reacts to changes in demand. Put more directly, the supply curve represents the relationship between the price of a good and the quantity supplied, typically upward sloping, indicating that higher prices incentivize more production. For example, consider a farmer who grows apples. If the price of apples rises, the farmer is likely to produce more apples to take advantage of the higher price. What this example shows is that as the price increases, the quantity of apples supplied also increases, demonstrating the basic principle of the supply curve. Understanding the supply curve is crucial for analyzing how changes in market conditions affect production and pricing strategies, which are essential for business planning and economic policy. Once that is clear, the next step is real-world cost structure and pricing, because it develops the next piece of the same argument. Cost structure refers to how a company's costs are organized and how they affect pricing. In manufacturing, costs can be constant or decrease as production increases. Put more directly, real-world cost structure involves fixed and variable costs that influence how firms set prices and manage production levels. For example, a factory might have fixed costs for machinery, but experience decreasing variable costs per unit as it increases production up to its capacity. What this example shows is that as the factory produces more units, the cost per unit drops, allowing the firm to potentially lower prices or increase profit margins. Understanding cost structures helps firms make strategic decisions about pricing, production levels, and competitive positioning in the market. Once that is clear, the next step is theory, perfect competition, oligopoly, monopoly, because it develops the next piece of the same argument. Market structures classify industries based on the number of firms and the nature of competition. The main types are perfect competition, monopoly, and oligopoly. Put more directly, perfect competition features many firms selling identical products, while monopoly has one firm dominating the market, and oligopoly consists of a few firms that may sell similar products. For example, in a perfectly competitive market, numerous farmers sell identical apples, while a monopoly exists when a single company controls the entire market for a unique product, like a patented drug. What this example shows is that this example highlights how market structure affects pricing and output levels. In perfect competition, prices are driven down to marginal cost, while monopolies can set higher prices due to lack of competition. Understanding these market structures is essential for analyzing how firms behave, how prices are set, and the overall welfare implications for society. Once that is clear, the next step is P2, because it develops the next piece of the same argument. In perfect competition, firms produce where their price equals marginal cost, while monopolies set prices above marginal cost, impacting supply and demand. Put more directly, perfectly competitive firms operate on their marginal cost curve, while monopolies produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, leading to higher prices and lower output. For example, a perfectly competitive market might see a firm producing 100 units at a price of $10, where the marginal cost is also $10, while a monopoly might produce only 50 units at a price of $15, where marginal revenue is less than price. What this example shows is that this example demonstrates that in perfect competition, firms maximize efficiency, while monopolies restrict output to raise prices, leading to inefficiencies. Understanding these production behaviors is vital for evaluating market efficiency and the welfare implications for consumers. Once that is clear, the next step is industry structure according to neoclassical economics, because it develops the next piece of the same argument. Neoclassical economics categorizes industries into competitive, monopolistic, and oligopolistic structures, each with distinct characteristics and implications for market behavior. Put more directly, neoclassical economics describes three main industry structures: perfectly competitive, monopolistic, and oligopolistic, each affecting pricing and output differently. For example, in a competitive market, many sellers offer similar products, while in a monopoly, one seller dominates the market with no close substitutes, and an oligopoly has a few sellers with similar products. What this example shows is that this classification shows how the number of firms and product differentiation influence pricing strategies and market outcomes. Understanding these classifications is essential for analyzing market dynamics and the implications for consumer welfare and economic policy. Once that is clear, we can pull the whole lecture together and see the full logic in one connected chain. Consider a hypothetical telecom industry that has just been deregulated. A textbook model would expect many new firms to enter, prices to fall, and the old monopoly to quickly lose control. But once we apply the logic from this lecture, the picture changes. Several variables move together at the same time: network scale, financing, product quality, customer lock-in, and the speed of innovation. Proving the supply curve tells us why the industry cannot be reduced to one simple adjustment. Real-world cost structure and pricing in theory, perfect competition, oligopoly, monopoly, explain why small changes can snowball when several variables feed back on one another. Industry structure, according to neoclassical economics, tells us to read competition as a process of innovation, response, and strategic adjustment over time. That is why one firm can still dominate if it innovates faster or controls a better network, even after entry is opened up. So the application is not just that competition changes prices, it changes industry structure through feedback, strategy, and innovation. Return to the deregulated telecom example. Proving the supply curve explains why the industry has to be treated as a system rather than a single price story. Real-world cost structure and pricing explains why a small advantage in cost, scale, or customer lock-in can grow into a much bigger market outcome. Theory, perfect competition, oligopoly, monopoly, adds the point that once several variables move together, the path of the industry becomes much harder to predict in a simple equilibrium model. The slide on P2 explains why stability depends on where the market is, how far it has been pushed, and which feedback loops are dominating. Finally, industry structure, according to neoclassical economics, shows why competition in that industry has to be modeled as a process of entry, innovation, differentiation, and response over time. So the theory and the case now line up. Real markets are complex, adaptive systems, and that is why static textbook competition misses so much of what actually happens.